This ain't rock and roll. This is Maggioreonbowie.com. Hi, I'm John Maggiore, and this is the Maggioreonbowie.com YouTube interview, where I do a weekly interview that has something to do with David Bowie. And as long as you're here, why don't you hit like and subscribe? And for daily content updated every day, visit the website, the blog at Maggioreonbowie.com. Today, I have a very, very special guest, Julian Shah-Tayler, aka The Singularity. Julian has carved out a remarkable career as a singer, songwriter, producer, remixer, working with legendary names connected with David Bowie on his upcoming album, Mike Garson and Carmine Rojas, who are collaborating with him on Hane Tatame, the next album to come out from Julian. His recent projects have included producing the Aladdin Sane 50th anniversary cover album, Forget That I'm 50. And this weekend, I was listening to his 2022 Grammy balladed album, Elisium, and it's really wonderful. This album was the number 4 album of the year on the New Wave podcast, with the number 1 album of the year on the New Wave podcast, with Melt, the single Melt, being voted number 18 on Subculture Shock. And by the way, the album has excellent, high quality, well-produced videos. So it's not only great to listen to, but it's great to watch. I listened to the album over the weekend, as I mentioned. And when I listen to a new album, I think about what does it remind me of? And even though the album is totally new, it's evocative of Duran Duran, 80s Iggy Pop. And if Bowie made an album between Scary Monsters and Let's Dance, maybe in 1982, it might sound something like this. So I really, really enjoyed it. You may have encountered Julian's music through remixes for Beauty and Chaos, or his award-winning work on film and TV, including Maleficent and Clash of the Cover Bands. Julian's music continues to make an impact on the charts, awards, and airwaves. On top of that, he also fronts a Bowie cover band, The Band That Fell to Earth, a David Bowie Odyssey. So there's much we could talk about today. And Julian, I wanted to ask you a little bit about Elisium, which I was listening to this weekend. But what we're going to focus on first is you recently did a cover of the entirety of Diamond Dogs, which you titled Hunger City. So Julian, welcome. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Maggioreonbowie. Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting. I'm very honored to be here.
It's very exciting to have you. So Diamond Dogs is one of my favorite albums, and it was my personal soundtrack in 2020 and 2021, which were years of sort
Dystopia.
of yes. And it's the album I've listened to more than any other since that time, and I have to say it's audacious to take it on to do a cover of the entire album. So what inspired you to take on this task?
Well, honestly, it was the first Bowie album I had it on cassette, and Sweet Thing and We Are the Dead were by far my favorite songs at the time. I was really big into the Cure.
Yeah.
And when I listened to the Diamond Dogs album, it sort of blended into that Cure sound. It's the only goth album by Bowie until One Outside. And I'm kind of a gothy type artist myself, so it always resonated deeply with me. And also there's a kind of funky thing coming in. It's like goth funk. I was a huge Prince fan and I was a huge Cure fan, and they just don't meet except in that album, Diamond Dogs. So I always loved it. I listened to it on cassette, and it was a different order. The songs were all in a different order on the cassette, I remember. And I just loved it so much. So it stuck with me. I didn't know any other Bowie material, just that album. And it's the 50th anniversary coming up. Obviously, being in a Bowie tribute band. By the way, tribute, not cover band, because tribute takes on specifically one artist and dresses like the artist and all that sort of stuff. Cover bands will generally cover other artists as well. So just as a point of specificity, basically, because I'm known for doing a lot of Bowie stuff, I just thought if I were to do a whole album and I was to do it on my own, which one would I do? So I'm going to do another one as well in the future. And it's got nothing to do with trying to improve on it. Obviously, you
Yeah.
can't improve on perfection, but it felt like I just really wanted to get that itch out. It's for me, not for anybody else. And if other people like it, then great, you know.
Yeah. Well, we exchanged texts before the interview, and you asked me what I thought, and I thought it was terrific. And I'm actually a big fan of when there's a quality. I'm not. I mean, I appreciate the distinction between cover and tribute
Mhm.
that you just said. When somebody does a piece of work that Bowie did and adds something to it, I appreciate that. And I just, in your view, what are you adding? Why do his work at all, or why do a tribute at all in the first
No,
place?
well, I'm not adding anything. I could take through the process of recording
Yeah,
it. I mean, obviously, I knew the album back to front just to play. No, we've never done the record back to front as a tribute act. So I'd sat down with my acoustic guitar and I just played all the way through all of the songs. Just had a click track and played my way all through all the songs to see if it would sound okay. And if I could get away with it. Basically, it's an excuse to do Sweet Thing and We Are the Dead,
yeah. We'll get to
honestly, because when I mean those ones are probably the closest to the original Bowie songs because again, Mike Garson on keyboards, you can't touch that guy. It's absolute genius. I mean, it's the best piano player in rock.
Yeah,
It's the best singer-songwriter in rock. And I gotta say, Bowie's guitar playing is fabulous. I love the way he plays guitar on that record. So, I just wanted to do something that was, because there's also something quite murky about the production of Diamond Dogs. So I wanted to also like make it a bit clearer
right.
for my version. I wanted to do things like 1984 is the song I knew least well. So I worked out the chords and I played them, picky acoustic guitar, so I could do something completely different. So arrangement wise, that one is most disparate, along with Rebel Rebel, obviously, because nobody wants to hear that guitar riff repeated again with somebody
Well,
else.
let me stop and ask you about Rebel Rebel, because you 2 minutes ago you said you weren't adding anything to it, but Rebel Rebel, of all the songs on the album, is the one that you do least like Bowie's original, but it's probably the best known song from Diamond Dogs to the casual fan. So why did you do that one so different?
Because I just feel, I mean, obviously I've played Rebel Rebel at every single Bowie tribute show I've ever
Yeah,
done because that's one of the big ones, along with Fame and the big ones. And it is my least favorite song on the album. I mean, just because of having heard it so many times, and,
yeah,
that riff, which is, in my view, the most iconic riff in rock and roll. I mean, it's the greatest guitar riff ever written. Simple, easy, it's fabulous, but everybody knows it. So I wanted to do something completely different. It's almost like a club
right.
remix, and of course, I did use the riff because it's as iconic as the lyric, but it's not the focus of the track, whereas that riff is the focus of his version. And I
Yeah,
just wanted to experiment with it. I mean, it's a challenge for me. It's sort of an intellectual game. Every time I do a cover, I've done a lot of covers of a lot of different people, and it's an intellectual game trying to figure out, A, can I work out the song, which generally doesn't tend to be too much of a challenge, and then B, can I make it my own? Like, can I record this song so it could go on one of my albums? And I think mostly I managed that with Diamond Dogs, with Hunger City, because I'm trying to make it how I would make it, not how Bowie made it and
yeah,
recreate it, if that makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. You mentioned that you were trying to make a clearer album. Do you ever come across a lyric that you've been hearing for your entire life, and then when it comes time to actually sing it, you're, wait a minute, what is this?
Oh yeah, certainly. Sweet Thing is a challenge to remember because
Yeah,
there's a lot of disparate, fragmented imagery that comes in there. It's sort of, I mean, Radiohead I find similar in some ways.
Yeah.
It's like the imagery is more important than the narrative flow. And
Yeah.
certainly with the cut-up technique that I believe Bowie was probably using at this stage, it brings in very deep psychological hooks that wouldn't necessarily come to you as a linear lyric. So, you know, when I was working out Sweet Thing vocally, I'd certainly misinterpreted some of the lyrics
Well,
originally, and then I visited them and saw what he had actually singing. So
yeah. So Sweet Thing, by the way, one of my very favorite songs. And I found meaning. I told you that this was the album of my 2020, 2021. Sweet Thing, the Sweet Thing candidate, Sweet Thing sequence. I meditated on this song so much, and there is an abstract quality to it that leaves a lot to interpret. But it's also, I don't sing, but I would imagine perhaps more than any other Bowie song that this would be a challenge. You have to do sort of vocal acrobatics, high, low, all over the place.
certainly, I mean, it's certainly his widest range, I want to say, because the beginning, it's safe in the city,
Yeah.
like that, going up to the, and will it be? It's all I ever wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a pretty wide range, but for me, I mean, that's one of the reasons it's so great. It's just it explores all of his, what made him deep,
Yeah.
vocally, lyrically. It's not a complicated song. I saw you published Ava Cherry's version
Yes.
the other day, and it's a revelation. I mean, I love her singing it. I mean, I don't love it as much as the Bowie version, of course,
Yeah.
but it's wonderful, isn't it? Isn't it? It's great, sang by a woman. Like
It is. I was surprised. I did not know that even existed until she told me about it.
right.
And I thought it not only was wonderful, but I also thought that she just did Sweet Thing. She didn't do Candidate, and I thought that she gave it almost a different meaning. It was more personal. And I listening to your version, and it to me, it once again, you almost imbued it with a different meaning than you covered the entirety of Diamond Dogs, but it wasn't imitating David Bowie. You were really sort of reinterpreting the album, and you have nuances that you said, how do you make it your own? Of course, it's recognizable as a David Bowie album, but it's not his album. It's not like you're trying to do a note for note, imitation. So I in that respect, I really think that you add something to the body of work that he gave to you in order to do something with.
Well, as a songwriter myself, I believe, and I'm sure Bowie felt, in fact, I believe I've seen interviews with him where he talks about this. Once you've published the music, once it's out there, it no longer belongs to you. It becomes the audience's property, basically.
Yeah.
And it gives, you can interpret it the way you want to interpret it. There's no point explaining a song as the writer, because all you're doing then is you're imposing your will upon somebody's interpretation of something. And it's a weird thing to say, but I feel like most art is streamed down from heaven, and the artist has the privilege of, laying it out and sharing it. I mean, and I feel like Bowie was a transmitter of cosmic knowledge, right?
Yes.
And you sort of, when you receive it, then suddenly it's yours. You've received it that way. So in re-recording that whole album, that is my pivot on it. Now, Bowie was the transmitter.
Yeah.
So I didn't get it directly from the source. I got it through him, and then I radiating it back. And obviously you can go back and listen to David Bowie's Diamond Dogs, and it's one of the greatest albums ever recorded. So I didn't do it for anybody else. I did it for me. And Bowie fans have been listening to it and really enjoying it, because of course you've heard Diamond Dogs 700 times, 800 times, 1,000 times, or whatever. So it's kind of interesting sometimes when you listen to Ava Cherry's version. It's so different, and it's such a different slant, and her voice is so wonderful.
Yes.
She has something so different than David, and such ease, whereas he is belting the higher notes. She's got such ease with them, and it's like butter. You know,
Yeah.
I love her version. Thank you for sharing it. I mean, I would never have known about that, you know.
The last thing I'll say about her version, I'm going to mention by way of asking you a question about your version. There's a line where she sings repeatedly, "If you want it, boys, get it here now," whereas
Right.
Bowie sings "Get it here thing," which is
Sure.
kind of surreal, and she makes it less surreal. It's almost more sexual with her.
Sure.
And with him, it's more in line with the overall chaos of the album. He's describing a world, that's falling apart, or that's already fallen apart. So when you're singing a line like that, "If you want it, boys, get it here," thing, like what's going through your mind? What are you saying? Like I don't know what he was saying, but what does that mean to you?
I think it's got a lot to do with. I mean, it's the esoteric, it's the cut up, and also we've got sweet thing, we've got here thing. I
Yeah.
think that it's a symmetrical, balanced lyric, and I think that it's for that reason, because that was one of the one of the things about the Ava Cherry version. It's funny that you flagged it, that I felt like she can sing that because she is the sexy person, right? And no matter how sexy Bowie was, I mean, he's not my flavor.
Yeah.
But no matter how sexy he was, he is representing something a bit strange. Whereas Ava Cherry's singing it, and you're going, okay, I wouldn't mind getting it here
Yes.
now, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a different. It changes the meaning entirely. It's taking it from avant-garde, arty approach to sexy.
Yeah.
And you see, to me, I mean, obviously, when I first came to Bowie, and it was I was quite young, I didn't see the sexuality that he emanated.
Yeah.
And now, of course, I see it, but I don't find him sexy or intimate in the way he puts music across. I find him intellectual, avant-garde, and cool and arty.
Right.
So there's it's a different approach, isn't it? It's like if you get a singer like Jeff Buckley, he is erotic and soul, and it's entirely in your body. That you can just feel Buckley. He's like a Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. He's a Qawwali singer. He channels the universe. Bowie transmits the art. It's a different world he lives in. It's an intellectual world that he lives in, which kind of the sexuality of it, if you're turned on by intellect, then he's very sexy. But otherwise, he's a weird alien figure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm half the way between. I mean, my biggest song is about sex, so it's like I'm halfway in between. So I want Prince and I want Bowie. Those are the two poles for me. Now, Ava Cherry is Prince singing a Bowie song.
Right. Oh, that's a great description.
and that's cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool. You know, she really nails it.
Yeah.
But it changes the whole sentiment of it. And
Yeah.
it's a different song, even though it kind of sounds the same because the arrangement's very similar and the sax is very similar.
You're not going to forget, you're not going to like confuse that what song it is, but it is very different, which was the same reaction that I had when I was listening to Hunger City. Let me ask you one more question about lyrics having to do with that particular song, and it's a similar question. I don't, but this is really, I think, the song in the album that is the most cryptic. And so you're singing the song, and I'm looking at my notes because I want to get it exactly right. If this trade is a curse, then I'll bless you and turn to crossroads and hamburgers.
I think it's and this is my interpretation. I feel like he is extrapolating a post-dystopian world, right? In America, because hamburgers are shorthand for America in 1974, right?
Yeah.
So he is, because he's trying to develop this 1984 theme throughout it. And Sweet Thing does kind of fit into that. There are only 3 songs that really do, but Sweet Thing's one of them. And I feel like he is extrapolating a bisexual, I think there's a very bisexual element to the lyrics, especially in the candidate section. And he's extrapolating it through this post-apocalyptic dystopia where he's just describing this process of seduction. Like he's seducing somebody, but he's doing it from the stage. Because you know, there's a bar at the end where you can meet me and my friends. Someone scroll on the wall, it's silver. So he's seducing somebody. He is putting himself in the position of being on stage and seducing his audience, men and women. And I think that that's the process he's going through as he's sort of like constructing the song. Because Sweet Thing is quite a nice little love song.
Yeah.
Candidate, however, subverts the notion of it and puts him on stage as this kind of like creepy alien figure trying to seduce the audience. I think that's my interpretation of it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the hamburgers, as I say, sorry, that was the specific question you asked. The hamburgers bit is because he's placing it in the American context.
Yeah. 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 That's great. Great. So before you get to Sweet Thing, before you get to any of the singing part, you open up the whole album with the introduction, which is not singing at all. It's spoken word.
Future Legend, yeah.
Future Legend, where you essentially have to act it. So when you were thinking about how you're going to start this, because if you don't catch people at the beginning, you're going to lose them. And this is not, you're not catching them with a song. What went through your mind and how you wanted to approach the Future Legend part?
I just wanted to make it, because pragmatically, I didn't want the publishing headache of having to deal with the what's it called, the piece of music that he uses, because he used a sample basically, which
he used a sample from Faces, right? And there's actually like you could actually hear Rod Stewart shouting, "Yay!"
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, listen to it very carefully.
Uh-huh.
You won't know who it is, but it's Rod Stewart.
Okay, well, I didn't want to do the same thing. I wanted to do something which was, because if you notice, there are kind of, because there's a lot of the songs on Diamond Dogs, there are really cool introductions, which are probably Mike Garson. I want to extrapolate the beginning of Big Brother. That bit of synth at the beginning of Big Brother is one of my favorite things on the album. But one of the things I always put to myself is, okay, if there's something that I can do to completely change it, but keep it consistent. And I've just bought, you know, a really cool reverby delay thing that I use with the guitar. I wanted to create textures rather than specific instrumental things. So the texture to me at the beginning there sounds a bit more, not joyous, but it sounds a bit more sort of shoegazy than the more sort of like vaudeville introduction of Bowie's. And so it's kind of deliberate, because I do that between most of the songs, like at the beginning of Big Brother, and then right at the end of the whole album, at the end of, you know, Chant of the Ever Circling Skeletal Family, it goes back into that sort of shoegaze, weird guitar textures. So it's like a loop. So you can put it, like Joanna Newsom does this. Joanna Newsom, you know, she started the Divers album with the last chord of the same album. So the very first chord of the album is the last chord of the album. So it's a loop. It's a cycle. Yeah. And I felt like that was the way I wanted to approach it. I didn't want it to be the same as Bowie's version. You know, I wanted it to be something that I would choose to do. And I hope it works.
Well, I think so. Yeah.
Thank you.
So speaking of the cyclical nature, the album was 50 years old, but to me, it sounds so relevant to today. And I was wondering if part of your motivation to cover it is that it has a political resonance in America today.
In some ways, yes. I mean, you know, obviously we're looking at Orwell, who was writing that. I mean, and just one of the reasons I loved the album initially. I'm a pretentious English literature student. I studied philosophy at university. I read a lot of English literature. I was a huge Orwell fan.
Yeah.
And then this album came along and it had the song 1984. I'm like, that's, and then Big Brother, I was train spotting that. I was like, oh, I've got to listen to this. This sounds great. And then that's what dragged me in initially, was my pretensions, not necessarily the music. And then of course you listen to it and it's brilliant and you can't stop listening to it. It is a perennial cyclical issue. So it is always going to be relevant, but it's the Orwell aspect of that, not the Bowie execution of that in some ways. I mean, the album is, I mean, it's hard to, it's apples and oranges to compare the art. But 1984 is one of the greatest modern literature pieces of all time. It's prescient, and we do live in that time, and we do have certain candidates who
I don't know who you're talking about.
well, we have them, the ones that would like to be Big Brother, and of course, yes, I mean, yes, of course, there's a degree of that, and also I'm 50 this year, so it's the perfect, you know, it's the 50th anniversary. It's the one that came out when I was born, and nothing has changed.
Yeah,
the cycle rolls on. I'm a big fan of Noah Yuval Harari, who wrote a book called Sapiens. Then he wrote Homo Deus. Then he wrote there's a new one called Nexus, and I recommend his books very much because he talks about the cyclical nature of politics, the psychology of humanity as it rolls through these cycles, and it's really fascinating. And Bowie saw this. Bowie knew that this was happening in 1974, and it's like, of course, if you're going to do something of worth, it has to be weighty.
Yeah. It strikes me that he ends the album with Big Brother. He doesn't begin the album with Big Brother. And the song is less about Big Brother than the desire for a Big Brother.
Right, sure. I mean, but that's, I mean, that you can extrapolate that to his supposed fascist leanings in Station to Station, because I mean, I go through this thing all the time. It's like Winston Churchill said, democracy is the least worst form of governance, right?
Yeah.
And it's absolutely true, because people crave, and we're going way off topic here, but people crave somebody who tells them what to do.
Yes.
Whether it be their father, whether it be a politician, they don't know that they do, because everybody will say, well, I don't, I've got my own mind and I do this. But you trace it back and you know, like, for example, I listen to Noam Chomsky and I think, oh, well, this guy's great. I listen to Christopher Hitchens. I think this guy's great. Listen to Noah Yuval Harari and I think this guy's great. They're telling me what to think, no matter whether I think I'm interpreting it correctly or not. If I'd been caught by, you know, Ben Shapiro and he resonated with me, I'd like him telling me what to do.
Yeah.
But he's not my flavor. So I am still subject to that human need. And that's what Bowie's talking about. We want you, Big Brother. We want this brave Apollo. He knew. And, you know, that's why, again, I think he went then to what this country needs is a dictator. Because that's the process you go through when you realize democracy is inefficient. I mean, how does democracy represent the best interests of humanity when democracy puts 500 million or 50 million or 100 million, whatever, voting for somebody who's clearly a despot?
Right.
Why does Bolsonaro exist?
Yeah.
Why are we in this situation? Because democracy is only for people who do their research and believe in objective truth. If objective truth no longer exists, there's no recourse, right?
Yeah.
If my objective truth is different than yours, then we can't come to an agreement. It's impossible. Sorry.
No, I mean, this, you know, sticking to Bowie, he addresses all of these topics over and over again. And, you know, that desire to be told what to do and to forfeit agency is in the song Big Brother. It's in Savior Machine. It's in Somebody Up There Likes Me. And also the interesting thing about what you're saying is the idea of objective reality. And this, we are getting afield. I wasn't planning to ask you this question, but is there a thread through Bowie's songs, Bowie's music, that we create our own reality with his changing persona, with his sort of immersive demand that you don't just sit there and listen, but you pretend that you're part of something that doesn't objectively exist.
Absolutely. I mean, I sorry to be self-serving, but I wrote a song which says we create our own reality.
Yeah.
Heaven is here if you want it to be, right? Because yes, you create your own reality. Everything you see does not exist in the world or in your eyes. It exists in the interpretation in your brain.
Yeah.
So if you represent yourself as a certain thing, then you literally are that thing.
Yeah.
And I think Bowie was very aware of this. I mean, he studied Buddhism at one point before he became a famous rock star. And I think the Buddhist way of dealing with that is very similar. It's like it's break down the ego. And I think he also using mime even, and much as mime is quite maligned, mime is representing yourself in a way that you don't exist. You're not really that mime, and then he's not really Ziggy. But when Ziggy starts overwhelming your real character, suddenly it becomes in charge of you. And that's why Bowie rejected and repudiated Ziggy and had to literally kill the character off. I mean, that because you get overwhelmed and you get stuck in this world. If you created the ego representation that you're comfortable with, then you've lost the reality of where you are and who you are.
Yeah.
Because who you are is the universe experiencing itself in every way. Now, if you're just simply Maggioreonbowie, I mean, I'm sure you get up in the morning and have a coffee and do things that aren't Maggioreonbowie. But
Yes.
if you get subsumed into this world where you are just that character, you've lost sight of everything else. So I do think that, absolutely. I think Bowie was incredibly aware of it right from the beginning.
So another question I wasn't planning to ask, but so Ziggy Stardust is a character that Bowie was playing and got maybe a little too close to. When you're doing your tribute show, are you playing the same character? Should we think of Ziggy less as David Bowie and more as Sherlock Holmes or James Bond that different people can play?
I've stopped. I mean, it sounds funny. When I first started it, I was dressing up, doing the makeup, all that stuff. And it's something that's a fan service thing, and I really appreciate that. And then I realized that I wasn't really good at playing Bowie. I have to be myself doing Bowie now. That's the only way I can do it. Because, I mean, firstly, people really enjoy the show. I mean, I've heard it many, many times that people are really into it. So I've started kind of having to not channel Bowie. And the more I back away from trying to channel, like singing with that faux Cockney accent, that was an affectation to him. He knew that was an affectation.
Yeah.
So I've stopped doing that entirely. And the more I stop doing that, the more people say, hey, you really channel Bowie.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it's like stepping back and being told you're moving forward. It's so strange.
Yeah. Oh. So let me ask you two last questions about this album, and then I want to ask you about your original music. Much as you did videos for Elisium, you also do videos for Hunger City, and they're all, unless I missed something, they're all animated. What was the process in having that done?
They're all AI. I set an AI thing on it. I just felt that, obviously you have to instruct the AI.
Yeah.
And I felt that seeing something is a lot more engaging for people than seeing, and the AI that I use, I really enjoy it. I haven't spent a huge amount of time on dialing into those videos because obviously the Hunger City was something I had to do.
Yeah.
It wasn't a release where I was sort of truly invested in promotions or anything like that. I mean, obviously I promoted it a little bit, but I will never be playing the thing live the way that I did it. So it's just, I had to do that. And obviously a lot of my Bowie friends, they really, really, really enjoy it when I release a cover version. They really like it. They, you know, my original music fans, they're big Bowie fans generally also. So they really like it. So it was fan service to a degree.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, I had to do it. And I like making videos for all the things. I remember, you know, I got into music because I saw Stand and Deliver by Adamant. I wanted to be him.
Yeah.
And I saw Don't Stop the Dance by Brian Ferry because I wanted the girl in the video.
Yeah.
This is like legitimately why I started being in music, because there's a visual feedback, isn't there? When you see something that is engaging, the music resonates more. And if a music video is excellent, then you sometimes the music can sort of sneak in the back door sometimes. So I think visual is a very important aspect of it. And I wish that I had the budget or even the time to make actual videos with me in them. But unfortunately, I relegated it to AI this time. And I think they're quite good. There are some really nice ones, right? I mean, Big Brother's cool. I like that one.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed them. I wasn't planning to watch them. I was planning to listen to them, but I found myself watching them. So
great. Yeah, I mean, I there are some I do more. See, you can program a particular prompt, and then you can change the prompt at a certain time, and then it can turn into something else. Some of them I spent more time on than others, but it's pretty much AI, and there's a debate around that we could get into, but we probably should.
We'll say that for another day. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me, before we leave this, now at this point, everyone who's watching this or listening will want to hear the album. Where can they find it or the videos?
So it's on Spotify. So it's on YouTube. I'll share with you the links. I've got a link to it on my website, which is julianshah-tayler.com, JulianShahTayler.com. And then the top published thing there, I think, is the link to the playlist.
Yeah,
on YouTube.
And I'll put a link to your website into the blog entry. So if you're watching this, go to Maggioreonbowie.com if you can't remember what Julian just said. So, I mentioned that I was listening to Elisium, which is, I think, your fourth album.
Realistically, it's about number 15.
Okay.
It's the fourth solo record under my name. 1, 2, 3. Yes, fourth solo record under my name.
Okay. I'm just gonna tease. I'm gonna ask where people could find that too. Well, let me ask you that. Where can people, if people want to find the album or see the videos, which are our live action videos, where could they find that for Elisium?
There will also be on a playlist that I can share with you on your blog. I mean, you can find everything through my website. I mean, that's the easiest thing. I check Facebook a lot. Facebook is my home for social media stuff. I know I'm a dinosaur in saying that, but at least it's not MySpace anymore. You know? And there's a playlist on YouTube, so I'll publish that too. And I like some of the videos for Elisium. I spend a lot of time on, and I'm proud of those because fortunately for the memory, the young lady in the videos and person I wrote the album for, we split up recently, and then this new album is about that. So hey, real life feeding me out. Who'd have thunk it?
That type of circumstance has been a good amuse before. So
I believe so. I think the Fleetwood Mac made a great effort at that.
So when you're doing a Bowie tribute, there's a built-in audience of Bowie fans. But when you're doing new music, how do you break through? I was thinking when an album was introduced 50 years ago, it was a very different process than when you're introducing new music today. And I'm noticing behind you, you have a frame of 500,000 streams, which, how do you attain that? Like, that doesn't just happen.
That one did actually. It's funny. That was released I mean, it's aggregated these streams over 10 years or something.
Yeah.
It was released as part of my first debut solo album. No, yeah, well, second solo album, sorry. And the song had a life. It got to number 12 in the American radio charts, and it's a very popular song. It's on, you know, workout playlists. It's on all sorts of playlists on Spotify, all over the place. And I had nothing to do with that.
Uh-huh.
It came out before Spotify really was a thing, before I was on Spotify, if I remember. So it's just taken a life of its own, and that's great. I mean, I love that it did. It is probably one of the most unrepresentative songs of my, you know, career.
Which song is that one?
It's called Wetter.
Yeah.
And it was a song I wrote for JC Chazez, who used to be in the band NSYNC. And everybody told me, you can't give him this song, you have to do it yourself. So, and it's great. I mean, it's just, it's a silly, fun, Prince influenced, sexy song. And it's a lovely song. And I always play it at every show. But is it deep? No, it's not as deep or thoughtful as a lot of the other stuff.
Yeah, well, now you're based out of Los Angeles, and you know, nothing's really happening in the music scene in Los Angeles, right?
Well, it's overwhelming to be here.
Yeah, I mean, how do you stand out in a town of artists where everybody wants to stand out?
I don't stand out. I mean, I play, you know, a few shows with I mean, I've played with Madonna's guitar player, I played with Byron Ferry's guitar player, I played with people from all sorts of different bands as a guest for one or two songs at the Whiskey. I do shows, I do the Bowie shows, and I do, you know, original music shows, but it's very hard. I mean, you don't, I tour constantly with the tribute stuff, and you know, so I'm all over the contiguous United States. We're planning our European tour for next year. We've sold out in Australia and New Zealand. We've been to Chile, sold out, with Ecuador, like all over. I'm constantly touring. I'm actually playing some original openers for the tribute in Toronto in January. And then I'm doing Toronto and Hawaii in December. So I'm doing the originals mainly as opening for the tribute. So that's the way to stand out.
Yeah.
It's to not be in LA and not be in New York and open up for a band that has 1,000 people in the room already. That's what really benefits me. And you know, tribute's a double-edged sword. It's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. Well, for very selfish personal reasons, the next time you're in the Northeast, let me know.
Where are you in the Northeast?
I live in Albany, New York.
Albany, New York. Well, we're going to be in Rochester on Friday.
This Friday.
Yeah, come.
As part of the Avant-Garde Clue Festival.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, are you close to Rochester?
Well, I'm about 4 hours from Rochester.
Okay, well, we'll message after, because we're playing there and it should be fun. I think we're doing two shows this weekend over in the New York. I fly back and forth to the East Coast all the time. Our agent is based on the East Coast, so I'm always flying back and forth.
No one who's watching this will care about what I'm just about to say, but on Friday I have to go south. But let's exchange messages anyway.
Yes.
So let me ask one last question about Elisium. It was eligible for Grammy and Grammy balloted. And what does that mean to somebody who's not familiar with the terminology and the process?
Well, that means that somebody on the Grammy committee determined that it was worth putting forward on the ballot. I mean, a lot of albums get on the ballot. I was on the ballot 6 times last year for various things that I've been doing. And of course didn't win for any, because, you know, you have to be supported by a major label. You have to have a lot of friends who are prepared to listen to the record, and that's a tricky hump to get over. I'm on the ballot again this year for another thing that I did. So it's a remix of one of my songs, actually, from the album with this song on it. So it's, you know, I'm not an industry insider.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to actually get any traction, but it's lovely to be nominated, sorry, to be on the ballot, and I get a few votes, but you know,
Yeah.
you need all of the people to know who you are and all of the people to listen to your record, and their list of 100 records to listen to. People just, who's this guy? Never heard of him. Don't listen to it, you know. So
I think it sort of establishes a permission structure. You hear something, hey, I like it. Should I like it? Am I allowed to like it? And you
yeah,
know, there's a professional critic or somebody involved with the industry that says, yeah, this is a serious piece of work. And it's like, okay, I that validates my initial reaction.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's bring that to Bowie, because Never Let Me Down was the next album I bought by Bowie after Diamond Dogs,
Yeah.
and I loved it.
Yeah.
I really loved it, and you know, many people would say it's his worst, but the song "Never Let Me Down" is just a very sweet, lovely song, and it
Yeah.
has a place in my heart. You know, that album, the sonics of the album, which everybody despises, I loved it. That
Yeah.
was my second Bowie album, you know, and
Yeah.
then everybody's saying you can't love that record. It's like, yeah, I can, and I do.
Absolutely. The first time I saw him was a Glass Spider tour.
Right.
And I mean that, you know, 40 years later, however long it's been, now I write about the man every day. So
Right. Right.
yeah. So we have covered a lot of ground, and we didn't even get to talk about the upcoming album or the Aladdin Sane album. So Julian, I just I'm so grateful that you've given me so much of your time, but I don't want to put you on the spot, but could I entice you to come back?
Oh, sure, I'd love to. Absolutely. I mean, yes, would I like to promote my upcoming album? Of course.
Yeah.
And would I like to talk about my, you know, the Aladdin Sane enterprise, which is a whole other thing. That was a whole other thing. Absolutely. I'd love to. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and I will have you back. But let me close with the question. I'm going to ask a variation of a question that I ask everybody. I ask everybody, what's your favorite Bowie song and album? But let me ask you, I think you already said what your favorite Bowie album was, but what's your favorite Bowie song off of Diamond Dogs? Let me ask it that way.
I got to say, my taste has changed. Station to Station is now my favorite Bowie album.
Okay.
And the song Station to Station is probably up there. I like, you know, I'm classically trained musician, so something with sections and different interesting bits is always going to win over a Rebel Rebel anytime.
Yeah.
So and Black Star is also up there. The song Black Star off Black Star, and Station to Station, song off Station to Station. So yeah, that's
the
probably
three songs that have songs within songs.
Oh, sure. And have a journey, have a dark, bitter heart, you know. That's probably why it reflects this dark, bitter heart.
Yeah. Those are among my favorite songs as well. So thank you. This has been terrific. Thank you very much. If you are watching this or listening to this, get the music, get Hunger City, get Elisium, and come back. Keep your eye out, because I'm going to hold you to it. I'm going to have you back. Thank you.
Sounds great.